back to What the Fertility Season 4. This morning we are excited to chat with Aliza. Aliza took to Substack to write about her experiences with secondary infertility, a devastating miscarriage classified as a blighted ovum, a D&C, and a diagnosis of Asherman syndrome. Welcome, Aliza. We are so excited to hear your story this morning.
Thank you. It's so good to talk with both of you about this. It's weird to kind of come in and say I'm excited to talk about this, right? Because um, it's such a difficult topic, but I really appreciate what both of you are doing and how you give people space to share and how much you all have both shared too.
Well, we are thankful that you're willing to share your story. And I think we were talking before we hit record about Substack and how all these, like, it's been such an outlet for you to meet all these wonderful women, maybe going through certain experiences, whether that's infertility or not. And I know Amanda and I are like, we're quote unquote blessed to be in this space, but at the same time, what do they always say? It's a club like you never wish to be a part of.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah. Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna no, I was gonna say I think with secondary infertility, it's probably even like more of a club you never even expected to be a part of. So that's your story, right? So you have a son.
I do. Yeah. So my son is a little over 2 years old. He's amazing. He is obsessed with dancing to the Nutcracker right now.
Wait, that
Um,
is so weird. My son is too.
is he really?
That is the fun. That is so funny because he does it all the time, and I mean, it's like now a running joke in our whole family. We're like, do the Nutcracker dance. Like that is weird. Sorry.
We'll have to send each other some videos. I mean,
100%.
one night of Hanukkah this year, because we're recording, it's January. So for, over Hanukkah, I got him. We're Jewish, but I got him like a bunch of little Nutcracker ornaments. Actually, they're so cute. They're from like Rifle Paper Co. or something, so that he could use them as little figurines, dolls.
Awesome. That
He's
is so
and
cute.
we flew to California recently. Did you know there's an Elmo Nutcracker?
No, I did not.
Anyway, yeah, we're a
Yeah,
big fan
all
of
of our
Nutcracker.
Christmas, like our
Guys,
wrapping paper was Nutcracker this year because he had to have Nutcracker. That is so,
I
sorry.
love
But
it.
that was so weird. Like that was such a
cute.
coincidence.
I love it. I love it.
But anyway, continue. I'm so sorry.
Yes, no, exactly. So I have a 2-year-old. He's a ton of fun. And so my husband and I, I didn't start trying to get pregnant until I was in my 30s. My husband and I had been together for over a decade. We got married. We waited a long time, got married, and then once we were in our 30s and we were like, okay, I think we're ready. We've had a fun, good time in our 20s. But I always knew that I wanted to be a mom, and so I think that there was this deep fear and anxiety that something because it was this thing that I wanted so much that something would be difficult. I don't know how we in kind of intuit those things. Fortunately, so I was just oblivious and so fortunate with my son that we started trying. I got my IUD out, I got pregnant, and it worked out, right? Like it was a pretty inconsequential, like easy pregnancy. Um, Delivery was tough. I ended up having an emergency C-section because of what was he wasn't able to tolerate the delivery. So that was hard and recovery around that. And because of the way that I had healed after my C-section, I immediately, as soon as I got back into the doctor, I was asking them questions about, is this going to impact, could this impact my fertility down the line? And they were like, absolutely not. The way your body heals outside is very different than the way your body heals inside, which is true. Um, but I had this, had
It's
this
just like the mom
feeling.
feeling. You're like, this is not gonna be easy.
Yeah, it's so, and yeah, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, right? But I was pretty concerned about it. And so when then we started, um, got my IUD out again. We're like, okay, let's start trying again. And I got pregnant immediately again. And so I was so relieved. I was like, okay, this thing that I've been losing sleep over, right, is not going to happen and it's going to be okay. It wasn't. And so what happened, so I got pregnant quickly. I felt so pregnant. It felt very similar to the first time. I was exhausted. I had to take a nap every day. Because I hadn't had any complications, there was no monitoring. So I wasn't going, my OBGYN didn't have me come in until 10 weeks, I think, to,
I read that on your Substack and I was like, oh my gosh, she's like fully into her first trimester before she's even like going to the doctor for the first time.
oh yeah. And and even like I took a I remember I so clearly I took a pregnancy test on a Friday afternoon and I was going to a show that night with two girlfriends of mine and we were going to dinner. And I told them, I just felt a lot more casual about it the second time
Yeah.
around. And I was like, if it was also if I had a loss, I would want to be able to talk to people about it anyway. We can talk about kind of my newsletter, but I'm somebody that uh, find it's easier for me to talk to people about things and be more transparent so that at least I can kind of destigmatize and connect over it as I would imagine both of you feel as well. Um, so yeah, so I told them, but at 10 weeks, we went in and there wasn't a heartbeat. They went on to do an ultrasound and found the blighted ovum, which is I learned is when there's a sac, but there's no embryo. So at some point, there had been a pregnancy, but it had stopped developing. Um,
And your body kind of, I've experienced one of those and like I it
so
is such
sorry.
a mental, and I'm so sorry for your loss. It's just like such this mental, it's a loss. It's a devastating miscarriage, but it's like you don't get to see it on the screen. And I think they always say like your body has absorbed the embryo back because by the time you see it, but I hear you say that you were like feeling really pregnant. I was the same way. I had all the pregnancy symptoms.
My boobs were huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I
has got to be so much worse because you're like, but I'm like, I feel pregnant. Like this makes no sense. Yeah. Like it's got to be like such a mind F, honestly.
exactly. I felt so. And I hadn't even been so anxious about the pregnant, like going in for the appointment. I told my husband, it's so funny. He was like, "Do you want me to come with you to the appointment?" And I was like, we've done this before. I feel so pregnant. I feel like it's gonna be fine. They're gonna rub the thing on my belly and find a heartbeat and we're gonna be good.
Yeah.
And he was like, I think I should come with you. I want to be there. Thank God.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it ended up being one of the worst days ever.
Yeah. Did they, so at 10 weeks, because I know with blighted ovum, sometimes, especially with women that have like had a miscarriage or have gone through infertility, you're doing like such an early scan, like a 6 to 7 week, and then they're like,
Yeah.
wait 2 weeks, maybe. But at 10 weeks, were they kind of like, this is a blighted ovum?
Unfortunately, they still made me wait. Yeah.
Oh,
I
really?
was, yeah, yeah. I love that you asked that question because you know exactly. Yeah. Um, I ended up having, they thought I might have to wait 2 weeks. I only had to wait a week. I think it was for insurance reasons.
Really?
And so another crazy thing that was happening. So I had actually, my husband is in graduate school. I work at a tech company. I had gotten laid off a couple of weeks before this from my job. And so I actually got a call a day or maybe the morning of that appointment from my doctor's office. And they said, your insurance isn't going through. We don't know if you're going to have coverage for this appointment. And I burst into tears on the phone. And because I had been waiting, right, 10 weeks to
Right.
come in and confirm this pregnancy. And so I spent the morning calling insurance companies, figuring out what I was going to do, how I would get Cobra coverage. Um, Ended up it was a cluster F. It was awful. And when you're going through something so emotional as the loss, a miscarriage, and then having to deal with, and that was just the start of it, right? So that has continued as a thread kind of throughout the year. This was in February or March of I can't. Anyway, so it was in February or March
Yeah.
of
Of
last.
last year, right? 2024?
Yeah. And since then, it's just that combination, right, of having to deal with the financial and the um,
Just like getting the bill.
administrative.
Yeah, like getting the bill after the loss. And like to your point, you do all this work thinking you're doing it for like a 9 month pregnancy. And then you're like, oh my God, I just did all that work for this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I looked back, so we booked this right several months ago, and I think when I emailed you both and I was like, surely by January I'm going to have uh, some better news to share. And there has been, I'll tell you a little bit more about kind of what happened from there, but we're still in such a limbo. And, if anything, I think my I've changed so much in terms of my conception of time and patience and what what luck or success looks like on any given day. I was in California over the Christmas holiday, and I bought myself this it's kind of cheesy, but a keychain that says like be lucky on it because I've been so unlucky.
I
I
love
feel like
that.
over the past year.
Like I'm speaking this, I will be
Yeah.
lucky.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna be lucky, even
Yeah.
if it's just that my suitcase busted open on the way home and we wrapped it up with tape and it made it. Like that
There
was
you go.
lucky.
I will take that. Yeah.
Perception. Yeah.
So,
Okay,
um,
so you guys find out at 10 weeks there's no heartbeat. They tell you, hey, maybe too early. Like, I feel like I know this game. And then they told you to go home and wait.
had to wait another week, confirmed it, and then they gave me an option. As you talk to a lot of women about, I could either take the pill, or I could go in for a DNC. And because of my C-section, which was pretty traumatic, I was like, I'm not going in for a DNC. I don't want to go back into the hospital. I'll take the pill. But I knew enough. Then I started racking my mind. I was like, who's kind of mentioned to me offhand that they might have had a miscarriage? I've needed like a Rolodex. And so I started just texting women who had said something to me, and they were amazing. I probably texted 4 or 5 different people, and they were amazing and willing to talk with me or sent me these long text messages explaining kind of what their journey and their process had been. And after talking with a few people, I decided, I was like, I think the DNC is going to be the better route because the experience of taking the pill is just
Horrific.
awful. And I wanted to put this behind me. I felt like I'll go in for the procedure, I'll go under. It's not going to be fun. I don't want to go back into the hospital, but then we'll move on. And 4 to 6 weeks later, I'll get my period and we can try again. So that's what we did. The DNC, honestly, my husband was like, you were gone for 5 minutes. It was so fast.
Oh, no.
They spend more time, right, putting you to sleep.
Okay. Okay.
And it actually was I was in one of the like maternity rooms. So it was actually it was like a supportive experience,
Good. That's good.
which other follow-on procedures have been so different.
Yeah.
But so it was easy. My recovery was fine. I went home and we planned this trip to take our minds off of it a little bit and wait. And I mean, I was devastated over the loss, and I was due within 2 weeks of two of my best friends, right? We were going to have babies together. And so there was a lot of grieving that, but I felt like I was kind of in this limbo period where I was like, until I get my period, I can't do anything. So I'm just gonna live my life, and then we'll start over. And then I never got my period. So then it was like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and I'm calling and messaging my doctor's office and telling them I haven't gotten my period. Is this normal? Should we do anything? And it was the typical response like, oh, it's normal. Sometimes it takes people longer. And I knew that I was super regular before. I've always been regular. So I didn't feel like it was normal. Um, and they eventually, they were like, well, is there any chance that you could be pregnant? Sometimes that does happen to people before they get another period. It's like, oh, how great would that be?
Of course.
Yeah.
Um,
You like get your hopes up and you're like, oh, that's an option.
This is the
yeah,
answer. This is why. Yeah.
of course, I took a pregnancy test and I'm looking to see if I was like, Sam, I think maybe there's a faint line. I get my hopes up. I go in for blood work. I'm driving home and I get the test results back and not pregnant. And that just felt like I felt like I had had the loss all over again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Gosh.
that was another bad day. I described it to a friend as like the way I was crying was like the way when I broke up with my boyfriend when I was in high school of this just
Oh, yeah. I know what you
Like hysterical, like my life
Yeah.
is over. I have no, yeah, I get it.
it's because I think when you're 16 years old, there's just your emotions are so intense. Um and it felt like
Good
that.
way to put it though. Like
Yeah.
that's so yeah.
I like put on whiny music and just
That's awesome
Got all the
though.
feels.
And coping. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I wrote about I can share it with you all, but one thing that I did write about a big thing over the past year has been it's not that like groundbreaking, but music has been huge. I've always loved going to live music, but I've gone to a lot more live shows, um, just as a coping mechanism, as a way to
Yeah.
kind of get through all of this. And I ended up writing about it recently, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll link that in the show notes for sure. Because I think listeners a lot of the times are like, what are some coping mechanism? What are things we can do? And you get like those generalized answers, but I haven't heard like going to shows and that like I love music. So that's like a really great option.
it's been incredible. I don't know if you're a Casey Musgraves fan.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my
Where are
gosh.
you, where are you located?
So I'm in Boston.
Okay, so you have lots of, I'm like, oh, where is she located? She has lots of
okay.
live music options.
We do. We're so lucky. We have a lot of hospitals and a lot of live music. Yeah, the Casey Musgraves show. So it was I didn't hadn't even got I thought about getting tickets because I liked her, but they were expensive. I didn't get them. And then the morning of that show, I honestly, I can't even remember what had happened at that point. We had gotten some more bad news about our fertility. And so I was upset, but my in-laws were babysitting, and my husband was like, well, what do you want to do tonight? And I was like, like, let's go to a show or something. And he said, Casey Musgraves is in town tonight. So we got last minute tickets, and it was this uh, hugely cathartic, incredible experience. Of course, then she played Rainbow as the last song of the night, and I'm just weeping. But
So
Oh,
therapeutic. Yeah, that's awesome.
oh, yeah, recommend that. So okay, so I never got my period. I really had to advocate with my doctor. I know a lot of women talk about that, and you've been through that. That part really sucks. That you feel, I know they say you have to be the expert on your own body, but um, that's so hard because you want somebody to be looking out for you and advocating for you. And I've just learned that that's not necessarily and rarely going to be the case, unfortunately, with the way that our healthcare system works. So I really had to advocate for myself. I took misoprostone. I don't know if that's how you say
Oh,
it.
really? So they made you
I didn't
do
have
that.
to take it. Yeah.
Did
They
they?
wanted,
Oh, sorry, I have so many questions.
no,
Did
go in.
did they like do a like another ultrasound at some point and say like, oh, is there retained tissue? Did they track your HCG down? Did they do any of that?
So they did the blood work, made sure that I wasn't pregnant, and then
That's right.
I think so. I think it was the misoprostone before they did the next ultrasound.
Okay.
So the whole time I'm like, I want an ultrasound
Yeah.
to check and see if there's any retained tissue. Um, yeah, so I wanted to make sure that I had heard about retained tissue. I knew somebody who had had that happen. Um,
And your body just kind of still thinks it's quote unquote pregnant because it can like kind of release some hormones. But wait, so the misoprostone, I mean, that's pretty much like having to do the pill in the first place before the DNC. Did you end up bleeding a lot or did it not do anything?
it didn't do anything. Yeah.
That's wild.
So I had retained tissue. So I ended up, and this was kind of in retrospect, I would have, well, course, you just don't know, but I would have handled this differently. So I went in for the ultrasound and I was scheduled. So my doctor wanted me to do a cyst, right, where they inject the saline into your uterus so that they can really see everything. Because with a standard, either transvaginal or just a standard ultrasound, they're not, it's kind of amazing. They're not able to see if um, they can see retained tissue, but they can't see scarring in your uterus. Um, and so they, the tech came in and she did the regular ultrasound and she was like, oh, you're not getting your period because you have retained tissue. That's the
You
problem.
so mad because you're like two
I
to
could
three
have got an
months
ultrasound. Yeah.
into waiting.
I've been begging for an ultrasound at this point, I had wanted an ultrasound for months. Yeah. Um, and
That's
they
kind
made
of
me go
crazy
through.
that wasn't standard of care. I've had so many miscarriages and I feel like I always get one after just to like double check.
It's, I,
I think places are
yeah,
so
I
busy
think,
that you just get forgotten, honestly.
yeah, and they want to, I guess they want to rule everything out, but I don't know why they want to rule everything out before they do that though, because
Easy.
it's an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
Oh, I would be so mad. I would have
I
been so
was,
mad and scared.
I was so upset. It took so much time. Of course, in retrospect, what is time? Just shutting my blinds.
Root tissue, yes. And you're livid.
Um, oh God, I was so mad. And not, gosh, well, not to mention, so I really should have pushed to have the ultrasound sooner, because then we would have found the retained tissue. But still, so then they scheduled a second procedure, which was um, the I never say this correctly, hysteroscopy,
That's
to
right.
go under again, for them to remove the retained tissue. This was with my OBGYN. This was not a good experience. It felt I was in the hospital with everybody. You're in a giant waiting room. They're wheeling you through. We had to wait several hours before the procedure even began.
Jeez.
So this
It
is
was,
new to me. So I just
oh,
assumed that they would have done another DNC,
That's
but
what
they
I
do a
would have thought.
hysteroscopy instead. I guess
yes. So instead of doing a DNC, they recommended the hysteroscopy so that would have the camera. It's very similar, I guess, but the difference being that they have the camera. So
and they're
there's,
going for like a very specific area. Okay, that makes sense.
Did they wind
yeah,
up doing with the saline too to see scar tissue at this like in the OB office, or no, they just didn't do it because they saw the tissue?
they didn't do it, and I should have said just do it anyway because
I
that
mean,
would have
but
saved me.
you don't know what you don't know. That's what's so
Yeah.
frustrating. You never like, especially just being in this for like the first time, never, no one knows.
And she framed it as, oh, good news, I don't have to do that. And I had heard how painful that procedure was. So I was like, great, I don't have to do this painful procedure. We found the cause.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I would say to somebody, if you go in for that procedure, you should have the doctor complete the procedure because there are things that they're going to see in that they're not going to see in the regular ultrasound.
And with the hysteroscopy, you're put under as well, right? I know sometimes you can, I was.
So for that one, I've since had three more this year. I'll tell you about
Amanda,
that.
you weren't, right? Didn't they just
I'm
give
not
you
put under
Valium
it
or
now.
something?
Yeah. I wasn't put under.
This one I was put under. Again, it was fine, but when I talked to the doctor afterwards, so this time that she was not um she was not hopeful. She said, I think that we got all of the retained tissue out and I sent it off for testing, but she said, I'm concerned that you have scarring from the DNC because when I went in, it was very difficult to remove the retained tissue. And part of that could have been because it was there for however long, 3 months.
Yeah.
But also because there was additional scarring that had formed. She just said it was not a straight shot. And she then said, you know what, then they started getting me on a track. Like they were like, okay,
This is
if
this.
if this comes back, um, and also if you don't have a regular period after this, we want you to get another saline ultrasound, and then we would likely recommend you to a specialist. And so um, I don't know if folks have talked about this, but there's these Asherman specialists that people go to, and that's another place. I'm so fortunate to be in Boston where I have one of these specialists 20 minutes from my house because people fly will fly all over the country to
Yeah,
do
I'm
this
sure
screening.
they're far and few between because I think for listeners that have never had a DNC, or if you have, when you're signing that paper, they say like the risk, I don't know if they use the word Asherman's or not, but like the risk of scarring is like 1% or something. It's like super, super rare. And then Asherman's, I think only 1% of people end up getting diagnosed with that. Is that right? Is that a right statistic?
I think that I don't know the exact
Pretty rare.
percentages either. I think that's right. And I was also, so I don't think that my doctor should have said this. When I got that DNC, I mean, I remember her talking to me about the risk of scarring, and she was like, there's no chance. Like, this is typically something that we see with people that have like multiple procedures. Um, you haven't had a procedure before. And I think it was just something about the way that my body, again, I'm in Boston. These are wonderful doctors. I don't think that she nec I of course looked into lawsuits, but I don't
Oh,
think that
yeah.
she
Yeah.
did anything wrong. I think that everybody's body heals differently. But I think that's right that it must go underreported. And even I was so shocked, I always look to like resources like Emily Oster were so important, so helpful to me when I was pregnant. And she recently put out another book called The Unexpected, which is about complications. They talk about miscarriage, they talk about emergency C-section. Asherman syndrome is not even listed in the index,
Wow.
which
That's
is
wild. I
shocking.
wanted to ask, and I know I want to let you keep going, but I wanted to ask too, you can also get Asherman's from C-sections. Is that correct? Okay.
You can. So I later learned that. And of course, yeah, I've done a lot of research and read a lot at this point. It's more common to get Asherman's from a C-section if you've had excessive bleeding. So if somebody for example, have like retained placenta after. So actually, that's the most common reason is somebody had retained placenta, and that could be from a vaginal delivery or a C-section,
Yeah.
and then they go in for the follow-up DNC. There's something about the
It's
um,
the uterus being enlarged when you have a DNC that it's like so much more sensitive and stuff. And you can,
interesting.
yeah. And so like a lot of like post-pregnant women, their uterus is so much bigger than maybe a 10-week uterus or like an 8-week uterus and it's standard DNC.
Oh, that's really
Like
interesting.
really thin. The lining's like really thin.
Yeah. And
Mm.
I wonder, maybe because I had retained tissue, the scarring, it was related to that. I don't know exactly, but that's the most common is either not necessarily from a C-section, but if you have a C-section where there's complications and there's bleeding, oh my gosh, I've read about so many women that, of course, don't find out about it until they're 1 or 2 years out, and then they start trying to get pregnant again. Um, but I would say that if you have had complications following a delivery and you want to carry more pregnancies, I would start doing testing and having them looking at it as soon as possible. Um,
Is there a specific test that they just can like tell you it's Asherman's? Or is there like, I know that might be a dumb question, but like, is there
no,
like, is there just like one thing that tells you it's Asherman's, or it's like all these different things that they're like, oh, we think that this is it?
it's really the saline. From what I understand, I'm not a doctor, but from my expertise this year, it's the saline ultrasound, which I guess is very similar to an HSG. I don't actually know exactly what the difference is, but I've told there's
I don't either. Like the hysteroscopy is like the camera and you go in, but
right.
there's the HSG and the SHG, which like I don't know
Oh,
the difference between the either. I had both. I don't know the
Me too.
difference.
I don't, yeah, I don't, I just was, I'm
they
in
all hurt.
my body.
You're like, yeah, I guess I'll come in for that
Not
appointment too.
really telling
There we
you.
go.
What's next?
That's
Yeah. Oh my God. Y'all get a kick out of this. I was at the dermatologist the other day because I got a bad piercing in my ear, and so I got a steroid shot in my ear to try and like make the cartilage heal better. And the doctor, I asked him if it was going to hurt. He said, some people have trouble with it. Uh, you know, it is kind of painful. And he kind of like he started doing it and he sort of checked in with me and he was like, "Are you doing okay?" And I died after. It was like getting your ear pierced. It was like so benign compared to
Did
Anything else?
you did you drop the, oh, I've been through infertility. I can do it. Like I used to do
I
that.
did
Like
all,
I
I still
did.
like,
I was like, this is so much better than going to the OBGYN.
yeah, dying.
He looked like he had seen a
oh,
ghost.
I'm sure. Literally,
I
and
always will be
he's
like,
an
I've been through IVF.
oversharer.
You can't hurt me. Like, yeah, I'm just like, sorry. This is real simple.
I literally will get blood work for like not even related to fertility stuff, just like in general, or like for like my lupus or something. And they'll like be like, okay, if you need to like turn away, I'm like, oh no, I get it like my blood drawn all the time.
I literally
Like
said that a
over
couple
here,
weeks.
I'm like,
Yeah,
you
a
know,
couple weeks ago, I had to get like 7 blood things, and she's like, "Are you doing okay?" And I'm like, "I'm a pro. Thank you, though."
that's so funny
It's
though.
sad, but I
I
guess like,
wish I wasn't, but
Yeah, I know,
we're
but
good.
that's so
And then, of
relatable.
course, my husband's he's so sweet, right? So Sam will try to relate. He's with me through all of these procedures and I mean, fortunately, he hasn't been through, you know, other medical issues, but he just can't. I mean, he's never had to lay back on a table and spread his legs and
yeah,
Yeah, it's true.
yeah. Okay, so you have the hysteroscopy to remove the retained tissue, and at that point, what would you say were like summer of last year?
that was last summer. It was so I just started a new job. So I mentioned I got laid off. I started a new job, and I was like, I'm gonna start this new job. Things are gonna be it's cleared up, smooth sailing. I'll get pregnant again. It's all good. Um, I was actually on a work trip and I remember I went to the bathroom and I started getting my period and I was ecstatic. I mean, I hadn't had a period in so many months that was the first indication to me. I was like, if I get a period, then things are better, that it's fixed and I should be okay. Um, it was really light. It was like 1 or 2 days of spotting. So we knew that something wasn't right. So I went back in, I got that saline ultrasound, and that's when they saw they could tell that so they try to inflate a balloon in your uterus. And the balloon just got stuck. Like it would not
Oh, weird.
inflate. Um,
Because of so much scar tissue. Is that
just bands of scarring across my uterus.
oh my God,
Um,
that's
This
wild.
is such a unique perspective on infertility because it's like, it's not something that number one, you were like born with or like you had any control over. But then at the same time, like you were saying,
well, nobody has control, right? But yeah,
yeah, yeah. But you're like, it's not even like, even the doctor, it like wasn't her fault. It just happened to me. That is so frustrating.
and it felt really, I think what was very jarring at that point too was it felt when I had been at my OBGYN and I had had an easy pregnancy, they were great. They were fine. It felt like as soon as things started going south, I just got dropped.
Mhm.
They felt the way that the nurses handled it, it felt like they were almost uncomfortable with talking to me about this, which was shocking, right? That you would think that they see this every day, that they should be at least confident in delivering to me the information that I needed and what the next steps were going to be. And it felt like this very kind of tentative,
Yeah.
oh, well, and
So
that's not what I
around it.
needed.
It's so true. And I actually work in OBGYN, and like some of the physicians have said to me, like, honestly, like we're trained to take care of babies and pregnant women. We are not trained to do all of this other stuff. And so like I felt the same way. I just felt like they just like didn't know what to do with me. Like they kind of tried, but then they like were just like,
It's
I
such
don't
a
know.
disservice because it's so common now. So many women have miscarriages or
Oh my
like things
God.
like this, that should be like standard training, that they should know how to deliver news or anything like this. Yeah.
You would think that this would be 50% of at least
Yeah.
what exactly what they're trained for and what their expertise around should be. I mean, these are what like I want to be pregnant. I want to have another baby, right? Um, yeah. So that was really difficult. And then so I got handed off to this specialist, which I was grateful. And of course, I called the office to schedule the appointment with the specialist and the earliest they can get me in. So that's something you learn too, right? When you start going through this, same things has now happened as I've been in touch with the IVF clinic. There's no urgency whatsoever. They're completely, again, even to that point, there's so many people, so many families and women going through this, men too, right? That clearly we need more services. You shouldn't have to wait 2 months to
Yeah. And you're in
get an
Boston
appointment.
waiting 2 months. I remember when I made my first appointment in Charleston, there's like 4 clinics, and I was like 3 months for a wait list just to get my first initial appointment.
That's awful.
Yeah.
I another time I remember the times when I like burst into tears. So it was like I burst into tears right when I called and they were like, we can get you in, and it was late September.
Yeah.
Um,
And
that
by
they
the time you call a fertility clinic, you want to be pregnant yesterday. So it's like three
Mhm.
months is a huge deal.
Feels like eternity.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. It's so painful. Um, I ended up, so I went in to see this specialist. It's Dr. Movilla is based in Boston, and he trained under. So anybody that's at Asherman's is probably going to hear talk of this doctor named Dr. I think it's Dr. Isaacson. Was in Boston for many years. Recently, actually moved down to a clinic in New Orleans. So a lot of women are now going to New Orleans to see him. But Dr. Movilla trained under him. There's also, I think there's a specialist in New York. There's one in California. And I've learned this through this Facebook group. So there's this Asherman syndrome Facebook group, which has been at times enormously helpful to me. At other times, of course, I've had to kind of back off and not read too much again because you're getting a lot of anecdotes, right? And everybody's experience is different. So you can get false sense of hope, of course, from other people's experiences, but or dread, false sense of dread, as well. Um, but I went to see him in September, and I the experience was immediately different, right? Because they're dealing with only with women that have had this, specifically these issues. And I sat down with him in his office, and the first thing he said was, "I'm so sorry about the year that you've had to get to." Ugh, and I'll like get choked up thinking about it because it was not a huge thing, but just that small bit of empathy, that one statement, and then going into these procedures. But that meant a lot and made a big difference
It
in terms of
saw you and acknowledged that. Yeah, that's
Big one,
awesome.
for
So
sure.
I mean, is he also an REI, like a reproductive endocrinologist, or he is like, I'm more GYN focused
he's, I don't know exactly
training?
what it would
We'll link
be.
him in the show notes, so I'll look him up. Maybe you can send
Yeah,
me a link.
and
Yeah.
I'll send some more information to you too, but he's not an REI, so he refers out to REIs. But his goal is to open up your uterus to get you to a place where you can either get pregnant, conceive naturally, or work with.
Is this
I,
him, Brigham's? At
so
Brigham's?
that's Isaacson. Yeah,
Okay, and then
he's
this is
like.
the guy that trained under him. Okay.
And I mean, most of the medical journals or any writing and test, like trials that have been done around Asherman syndrome, Isaacson has like been the
The
driving
guy.
force behind it. There's so little research specifically on what, and that's part of the frustration, right? They're still trialing. There's certain things that, there's a gel that they can put in now to prevent the regrowth of scar tissue or not scar tissue, but scarring, excuse me, in your uterus. that is in trial that I wasn't even able to get access to because the trial was over. And
Oh my
it's
goodness.
very frustrating because I think it could help my situation. But I talked to Dr. Movilla about it, and he was like, it's not gonna, I mean, it's not gonna get passed through FDA until um, it could be like 2027 before
Mhm.
it's
And you're like,
available.
I would be having a baby before then.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. By then, we're gonna have a surrogate in Mexico.
Yeah. I love how like we laugh, but it's actually very true. Like we like surrogate Mexico, let's do it. Like Amanda and I just mentioned surrogacy yesterday.
Real, I would,
You're just like, it's just so expensive. Like,
oh my God. I don't, it is so expensive. It is so expensive.
and no
I
problem.
I mean, in moments, I mean, I've cried and I'm like, I don't care about buying a house. I
Yeah.
care way more about
Growing
having
your
a
family. Yeah.
second baby one day. And I recognize the privilege. Like I already have a child, I have a son. So there is just something like very unique and difficult about secondary infertility too, right? You're already immersed in this world of people with children and you're going to the playground and all of a sudden everybody around you is pregnant again. And even just yeah, being around other families. I would imagine both of you can feel this. It's triggering and it's not easy. Because you want to be with other people to talk to them about your kid dancing to the Nutcracker and what they're doing about transitioning from the crib to a toddler bed or whatever. Um, and you want to go to the second and third birthday parties. And sometimes I have to spend a lot of time asking myself, why why I'm going to something or why I'm spending time with certain people and whether or not I'm in a place on that day where I can handle it or not. And I want to be, but not every day.
Oh,
I
Yeah.
yeah.
can't do it
And
every day.
even like, I know for me, it's like just even little things. Like I went to the playground the other day and some random person, we were just a mom chatting because our kids were playing. And she was like, oh, is this your only child? And it's just that little question that they don't know. They have no idea about my story. They know nothing. And they meet, it's like, they're not being like mean intentionally. They have no idea. But it's
Yeah.
just a little question that like it's like right in the heart. And I'm like, no, he's my only one. But like little do
Like
they know
people
I
always
have
ask that.
so many others now that have, like are in heaven. But like, yeah, I'm
I
just
could show you all the shots that
yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah, those big those questions for sure.
I spent some time I was talking so I also, I had kind of been trying to find a therapist that worked for me and for insurance reasons and different things. Like we moved and whatever, and then but finally this year I found a good therapist, thank God. And but one thing that I was talking to her about, kind of just going into the holidays too, was how do I even handle that question of, oh well, are you going to have the innocent question? Are you going to have more? Are they your only one? We were kind of talking through different tactics of how to
Like
handle that because it's not an easy question to
No,
respond
it's
to.
not. And you can either just be like bold and straight up and make people feel uncomfortable, or you can be nice and like I'm sure, yeah.
oh,
Exactly. And I had a situation, so I was at a work event and I got the question and it was a weird interaction. It was very loud and I was kind of taken aback by it. And I think my response was something along the lines of, we want more, but we've had a tough year. And the person was, again, they were flustered and they were embarrassed and they weren't able to hold that information. So it ended up making me feel worse because I felt guilty for even
Yeah.
saying something. And I just, ugh,
I've been guilty. You know what? I've been so guilty of it too. Like asking like not Amanda, like I don't think I've ever asked that, but like just asking the innocent questions and being like, "Oh my God, why did I say that?" Like if someone ever
me
said that to
too.
me, I would be so mad. But it just again, like it's just like I feel like it's like, where do you work? What do you do for work? How old are you? It's just like one of those like
yeah.
starter conversations that more and more people are like, ugh, not a good response.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, when I went to Dr. Movilla, so kind of Amanda, to answer your question too, so they're able to kind of diagnose Asherman's through the cyst, but it's not until they really go in with the camera that they can tell you how much scarring there is or what part of your uterus is impacted. And so he explained when he was going to go in, he would basically give me a percentage of scarring, and they categorize, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but up to like 25% or less of your uterus is considered mild, and all of the mild, medium, or severe correlates to your preg eh, pregnancy outcomes potentially after having this. So less than 25% is mild, 25 to 75% is medium, moderate, and then over 75% scarring is considered severe. And at that point, your likelihood of carrying another pregnancy to term is pretty low. So he went in, I had 55% scarring on my uterus the first time, which meant that, yeah, 55% of my lining was scarred.
That is
Um,
crazy. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
thanks. And um, I didn't know. So this time it's called a hysteroscopy, but very different than the last time when I went under. He did give me that option, and I knew this going into it that I would have the option either to go schedule for another day to go to the OR, or I could do it in the office. And I had taken Advil beforehand. There's no other pain medication, pain management that they can give you. Um, they can put a little bit of what is it? They like spray something to numb like your cervix.
Yeah.
So that helped, like with the insertion of the scapulum. I'm very clearly not in the medical profession. Um, so he gave me the option. I said I wanted to do the procedure that day. They can always stop if it's too painful. Um, it almost feels like you're in a dentist's office. And you're in a chair. My husband had to be out of town, so my mom was actually with me that day, thank God. So I'm like squeezing her hand, and you can watch it on the screen. It's kind of remarkable. But he's going through with the camera and these little teeny tiny scissors um, on the end of the camera and cutting back the scar tissue. And his goal is to try to open up as much of the uterus as possible and be able to see the openings to the tubes. And um, it took, it was probably about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, where he was going through and doing that. Um, it was awful. I mean, the pain is like, it's like, uh, cramping like you would. It's like having an IUD inserted times
Oh my
100.
I just can't
Um,
believe you were put under for that. Like, that's wild.
gosh.
and I think part of it is um, wanting to get it done quickly, right? If you have to schedule to go into the OR, then they can't do as many of
Wait
these
for it. Yeah.
procedures. I went on to have two more of those. So his recommendation was to do three. So you do one 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks later, and then a month later. And they want to see how much your scarring has dropped. So I started at 55%, then I got down to like 25%, and then maybe like 20%. So it was like significant progress, but scarring did continue to come back. And then after the third one, they sent me to have an HSG to see, because that's the only way to confirm whether or not your tubes are actually open. Um, that HSG, they they were basically able to see, yeah, your uterus looks a lot better. So they were able to insert the balloon, but there was still a couple patches of scarring, and my left fallopian tube is still blocked. Um,
Wow.
so it was kind of a question. That was in October, November, this past year. And so at that point, we started trying. They said, like, you can start trying again. And it's kind of a crapshoot to know,
I was
is
gonna ask you, had you tried during any of this time or you were like waiting?
I, once we confirmed the Ashermans, and while I was going through the the procedures to open it up, we stopped trying because there it didn't feel like it wasn't worth it.
Mhm.
Yeah. But once I had done after the second and the third, then I was like, okay, we could start trying. Um, Once we can, it was, it was disappointing to learn that both tubes weren't open, that one of them was still closed. And Dr. Movilla basically said, he said, you can come back in, we can try to open up that other tube, right? But there's going to be diminishing returns the more procedures that we do. And all this was caused by a procedure, right? So we don't want to have you keep
Getting
uh, doing this. But he works very closely with the REI. So once I get into I've just started um, the testing so that I can go through IVF. And they'll work in tandem. So I would imagine that there's going to be some, if I get to a place where I'm able to do a transfer, they might try to line it up so that he does another procedure to open things up in advance of that transfer.
Because it's
Um,
kind of like an endometriosis surgery where like it can grow back like after some time.
yeah, it seems like mine is coming back because each time um I never got down to zero. Like there's women that I think they go in, they have one procedure and and then they get pregnant like their next round. So we've been trying now for 3 or 4 months and haven't been able to get pregnant. And since I've just started seeing an IVF specialist, had another ultrasound before Christmas. I wanted them to do it. I asked them to do it during my ovulation so that they could measure the lining, and my lining was crap. It was like 3.2.
Well, just
Uh,
because of like all the procedures too, probably. It's probably so confused.
yes. Yeah. And I'm very regular, so I'm getting periods, but they're still very light. So they're not quite right. And I also, one of the oddest things too, and I've listened to some other people, it sounds like actually others have had something similar, but when I ovulate, ever since this happened, I know exactly when I'm ovulating. I have a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um,
That
which
happens
is
to me now.
really,
Yeah, and it's called, oh my gosh, what is it called? Have you looked it up? It's called like starts with an M. I gotta figure this out. But like
okay.
it literally feels as bad, if not worse than a period, in my opinion.
It's a totally different sensation,
Yeah.
but it's like uterine pressure.
What
And
is
I
it
don't get period cramps anymore. So when
called?
I was 14, 15 years old, I remember being curled up on the ground in pain because my period cramps were so bad.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that.
If you look up like ovulation pain, it's like it looks like a German word. It's called Mittelschmerz.
Oh
And
my
it
God.
literally it's like very specific, it's specific to ovulation pain.
That's so
And you've
interesting.
had that too?
Yes, but only after my daughter. Yeah, I've had it. I always get it now. And I think Amanda and I've talked about I can tell which side I'm ovulating from because the pain is like so heavy on that side.
I feel
Yeah,
like good though,
exactly.
then you know you're ovulating, right? Or no?
Yeah. Well, I guess.
That's what I
Hoping.
hope that I have something going for me, right? Gosh.
Right?
Not be
They
lucky.
said it looks like I have eggs. I don't, yeah. So we'll see. I haven't been through a retrieval yet. That's going to be the next step. It was also interesting, I talked to two different reproductive endocrinologists. Is that how you say it? To kind of consult with them afterwards because it is such a specific thing. I've also been referred now into a specialized OBGYN if and when hopefully I get pregnant again because there's increased risk of ectopic pregnancy and also placenta accreta, which is when your like placenta implants too deeply in your uterus because of these lining issues. So if and that's something that they can't really diagnose it or know that you have it until you actually go to deliver. And so there is there's about a 25% risk of having to have a uh, what's when you your uterus is removed.
Um, uh, Hysterectomy.
Hysterectomy. I was
I
gonna
feel like
say
we've all been trying not to say hysterectomy this whole time for like hysterectomy.
exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
a hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very, yeah. I didn't realize that was such an increased risk with Asherman's, but it makes sense.
Yeah. So especially, I mean, women that are going through this before, it's just before even having your first kid and the risks associated with it is really scary. So I've been fortunate that I've been kind of referred into the doctor, but when I talked to two REs, one of them they were both good. I think one made a statement that it just has stuck with me where she basically commented, she was like, you're not infertile, like you don't have secondary infertility, you're not infertile. And I know that it was coming from a good place of like trying to like you have eggs, um, and you should be able like there should be healthy lining, you should be able to carry another pregnancy. But it just felt so dismissive because I just felt like I am, right? That is what is happening here. Before this procedure, I was able to get pregnant. I was able to carry pregnancy, and I'm not, that's not happening right
I'm
now.
so glad you brought that up because that's kind of like why we need the podcast, like what the fertility, and then like because I'm in the same space of like I have recurrent pregnancy loss. So it's like I don't have diagnosed infertility. I have diagnosed recurrent pregnancy loss. And I feel like we're always like such on the line of like, do we use the word infertility or do we use the word like couples struggling with growing their family? Like it is a very
Mm,
weird space. And it is, I love that your experience of like, no, I want to be labeled infertile because I cannot have another kid. Like, I get, like, right now, I get that.
that makes so much sense. And it's so personal, and but I've also found that 8 months ago, I I was really scared of the word infertility, right? I didn't This is the club that nobody wants to be a part of. The best club that nobody wants to be a part of. And so I was really scared of that word. But then I found um, when somebody would ask kind of what was up, and I'd say I'd had a miscarriage, um, it, it didn't. It
Wait,
didn't
but
quite explain kind of what
yeah,
was going on. And the responses are very different. And once I started saying, you know what, we've had infertility challenges this past year, I found that it actually unlocked something where I was actually able to find like more meaningful connection with a lot of people,
yeah.
if
Because a
that
lot
makes
of times
sense.
people are like, oh, I know everybody has a miscarriage. You'll get
It
pregnant quickly. And you're like, "No,
Exactly.
that's
doesn't
not
matter.
what's going on."
Yeah. 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 It just didn't do your whole journey justice and like, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Well, I'm
um,
excited
that's
for
where we
you
are.
for IVF. I'm sure that's scary. Excited is the worst word. I'm sure that's so scary to move into, but like also maybe hopeful that, okay, this is like I have a plan. Like this
Yeah.
is my next thing to do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We'll move forward and um just we'll take it one day at a time.
Well, are you planning? So are you going to plan to share any of these, like your IVF journey on Substack or any, if listeners are listening to your story, where can they find you? Is there a good spot to kind of reach out to you?
Yeah, good question. So my friend Asia and I, we write a Substack. It's a newsletter called Platonic Love, and we started it about a year and a half ago. So before any of this had happened. It really came out of wanting to talk about. She's several years younger than me, is getting married next year. Of course, I have a toddler, and it was about kind of bridging the different life stages that we were in and being vulnerable and talking about various topics. Interestingly, it's been hard for me to figure out how to weave this journey into that conversation. So I did end up writing about my miscarriage several months after it happened. And I want to I know that I will continue to share pieces of this as well. Um, so and also it's kind of, I was talking to somebody about it can be hard to talk about other things sometimes too, because, when somebody's like, "What's up with you?" I'm like, "What's up?" is kind of that I've had a lot of surgeries in the past year and we're about to start IVF and I'm really sad a lot and it's been really difficult, and I'm grieving. But there's a lot of, good things up too. And so, but the newsletter is awesome and we cover a range of different topics around friendship and motherhood. And so I'm sure I'll be
We'll
talking
link,
about it.
yeah, we'll link the link to Platonic Love in the show notes if anybody wants to find you or reach out to you. I'm so appreciative of everything you shared. I know that that'll help people. We have had a handful of guests ask about Asherman's because we've had, I think, 2 podcasts in the last 3 or 4 seasons, but you're the first one for season 4.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much. It was great to talk with you, Kat and Amanda.
Thank you.
Do the maximum amount of time because like if I do 2 months and it doesn't work, I'm gonna be so mad at myself for not just doing the 3 months.
For sure.
Yeah, so I did 3 months. It was like super crazy hot flashes. I was like nauseous. My hands and feet hurt like hell. Like it was like I felt like this must be arthritis or something. It's this joint pain. My back hurt. Like it was so weird. And like my skin got dry. Like you straight go into menopause. Like
That's what I was, that's exactly what I was going to ask. It shuts your body down, right? Like it you
mhm.
basically tries to suppress everything.
Yeah, yeah. So like my estrogen was like undetectable. Like it was so low, which is what it's supposed to do. So we did that. We were going to go into a transfer and we were going to do a modified natural transfer, which is what I had been used to. I've done medicated in the past, but modified natural, you don't have to use estrogen. And that was like the whole point, right? So we went into it like that, but my body was so shut down, it wasn't going to, like, nothing was happening.
That's what I was
Um,
curious about, like how you could do Lupron and then a modified, like natural modified.
Yeah, I had been worried, and they were like, "Yes, it can be really hard. Like sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. We'll try and see." And so I took like well, I did Lupron and Letrozole every day for the 3 months or whatever, and then took a little bit more Letrozole for a couple more days, trying to like force your body to like make a follicle. Like it was a follicle. My lining was like 1 millimeter. Like, um, so finally, I think it was after like 2 weeks, they were like, all right, let's add in estrogen. We'll have you come back in a week and we'll look. And my lining was like thicker than it had ever been. Like, I
Just
was
with
like,
a
there's no way this is
little
going to
bit
work.
of,
Yeah,
yeah,
a
with
little
a
bit
little
of
bit of
estrogen. And it was
estrogen.
like, boom, hi. Yeah. And I felt so much better. I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
I feel like a normal person again. Like, so that's crazy. Yeah. And so we went in, and we did a transfer. Oh my gosh, what I don't even oh man,
With
what
this,
day was that?
was it
We were close.
August,
Um,
September?
yeah, it was just oh my gosh. Oh, it was December 17th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Because mine
And
was
this is
16th and
yeah.
one day
Yeah.
after. Yeah, the
Is
7th.
it was this the 13th embryo left? I'm trying to keep count because
Oh
you
my
had
gosh.
17. We
I
had
know. I was
17,
like, so at that
Wyatt and
point
Remy, and then the two
Yeah.
used
miscarriages.
Yeah. Right?
I had
12?
used a total of 5 with my cousin, and then I had
Oh,
transferred 2 each time
yes.
with my donor embryos. So I had
Oh,
used
okay.
6. So then I transferred 2 this last time, 7 and 8 for my.
What
So
was your, I was gonna say like transferring two after having mono
I was
was,
terrified.
yeah, was
Yeah,
that like a
I was
whole,
terrified. But I was like, if it ends up being twins, it's just such a different type of twins
Yeah.
and
that,
the chance it
like,
would be mono is like, isn't it like
oh God.
1% or
I
something?
mean, like, what does that matter to us? But like,
Right, right.
like, yeah, but realistically, like, it's such a low percentage, and yeah. So if it's die twins, then it's such a different, like,
experience.
yeah. So it took, but we don't know yet, like, how many took. I haven't had an ultrasound or anything.
Well,
So
if people don't follow you on Instagram, you got to tell the people you're pregnant.
I know, yes.
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been crazy. I'm still shocked. I have no idea what to think right now, and I'm just nervous. And I was supposed to have a scan already, but I actually ended up in the ER with a migraine all day. On the day I was supposed to get scanned.
Oh no.
I know.
Are you
It's
still
super
working as an ultrasound tech?
No, I quit after like we lost the boys. And at that point I'm like, I want to just find a job that covers IVF. So I'm working at Target. Like,
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I
yeah,
totally
Whatever
get that.
works. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, whatever, it's not forever. I'm stocking shelves, and you know what? It like is a nice
It's
break on my
pay.
head.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I
have,
like,
yeah, in one of our MFM offices, one of our ultrasound techs, she lost her infant, and she still like she did my anatomy scan, and I'm
I
like,
couldn't do it.
how do
I was
it
already like having
yeah,
such a hard time like doing it,
going through
going through all the stuff
yeah,
that like and I would love to maybe go back at some point. I loved my job, but like at
yeah.
this point it's just
I
like not
and
healthy for me.
And for those patients that don't know, like I told my husband before we went in, I was like, don't ask any questions. Like, don't ask, like, is everything going to be okay? Because the anatomy, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
then that poor person is like, yeah, my anatomy scan was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
you. It's just, I don't know how you guys, I don't know how sonographers that go through infertility, go through IVF,
Yeah.
stillborn, I don't know how they go. I
Yeah, it's crazy. And like, at first when I was like first going through all the treatments and stuff, and since I was seeing IVF patients also, like it was kind of nice because like I could talk to
can't.
them. And
Yeah.
like I do remember one patient that she was getting ready to transfer a donor embryo, and like I left the room after her scan and she was getting dressed, and I was like, you know what, I have to go talk to her. So I like went back in the room and knocked on the door, and I was like, hey, just like I did the same thing. And she was like, you did that? And I was like, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I just want to like wish you luck. And she's like, oh, and, like hugged me. It was just like really nice, like to connect with people that like no other person there is going to be able to connect to them. So that was really nice.
Yeah.
That helped me a lot, like going through a lot of the stuff. But yeah, I remember having a conversation with like my therapist, and they were like, I just don't think you should do that. Please don't go
Not
back.
every day.
Like,
Not every day going in there. Yeah, I remember even
yeah,
with me, like I'd go in and I'd hear like ultrasound, like I'd hear the baby's heartbeats through the wall, and it was just
yeah,
this. You shouldn't have to deal with that in your day to day, especially as you're already processing stuff. But
yeah.
okay, congratulations. We are
Yeah.
so excited for you. Your betas
oh,
look phenomenal. I think that was the last
Gosh.
thing you just posted.
Yeah.
Like all the love, hope, peace, prayers. We will be following along big time.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
excited for you. And you've shared so many resources. So we will make sure we get all of the right resources, the links. We will put them in the
Perfect.
show notes. We will include your Instagram handle because you're super open. And I think like you're open to people reaching out to you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So
thank you for just being so vulnerable and walking us through your entire journey. We're just so grateful
Yeah.
you're on the show. And I know that you are going to be able to, like, so many women are going to be able to just like feel connected with you that have gone through similar things. And we just so appreciate you.
I appreciate it.